Oh, the north end. That's what I meant at the north end, because I was going to say Bowditch, yeah.
Yeah, and you would never know that it was there.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
and the tide came all the way up there. You couldn't walk from the Pink Trail to Bowditch.
I'll tell you, I can find out. Good morning, everyone. Well, it's only 9:59, but we'll just have a slow opening here. Everybody's a little groggy this morning. It is Wednesday, January 15th, 2020, and this is a regularly scheduled work session of the Fort Myers Beach Town Council. It's 10 a.m. and the meeting is called to order with all council members present. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
My second one today.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Morning, everyone. The first item on our agenda is an update on the Estero Boulevard rehabilitation project. Good morning, gentlemen. Rob, Daryl, who wants to start? And should we just start immediately with questions? Anybody have any questions for these gentlemen?
Madam Mayor, just for the record, we'll state that the Lee County did submit a written report that's in your kit. And as part of the agenda online, and members of the public can read it to see the status of the progress of county on the Estero Boulevard project.
Yes, thank you for that. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah,
Bruce?
come on up, Rob.
We're trying to figure out who's going to take the shot.
Well, it's not a shot. Wait, other side,
Oh, yes, that microphone doesn't work, Rob.
please.
Oh,
Yep. Although it is working, now it's working, okay, whatever.
I was just curious, down at the south end between, say, Tarpon and Estrelita, on the bay side of Estero, they've got some like paddle boards stuck in the ground that have numbers on them, like 1369.020 or something.
Rob Phelan, Lee County DOT for the record. Those boards that you're seeing are station boards. So what they do is they indicate the distance along the roadway. We use a center line alignment. Starts at a certain number, and then every 100 feet is a new, what we call a station. So where you see the 1349 plus 50, that's 13,490 or 4,950 feet from a starting point. Doesn't mean we always start a project at 0. So it might start at 1,000 or 1,500 or something like that. We use essentially the same stationing from the north end of the island to the south end of the island.
What's a station mean?
Station is a holdover from when they would go out and actually do staking for railroads. It's basically a 100-foot interval. So
Was that at the right-of-way line, or what would that be?
They may be placed at the right-of-way, I believe. Typically, they do place them at the right-of-way, but I wouldn't use that as a, true and verified right-of-way line.
I was just curious, I'd never noticed that before, and I always see the wood stakes with the flags on them and writing and stuff, and that was just.
Yeah, there's various
Different.
types of methodologies that we use to indicate where we are on the plan sheets.
So, last time you guys were here, I'm gonna go by memory rather than trying to look for my notes. Did you say that we would be done with 3 and 4 in July? And now it's September, or did I misremember that?
Was July net, the report says end of summer.
Darren Brown, Crystal Construction for the record. The contract time for segment 3 and 4 goes through July 28th for substantial completion. And then final completion follows that punch list, putting sod down and making sure everything's done. Provided we don't have any unforeseens or changes along the way, we're still gonna track on that target as close as we can. Like I said, unless something, pretty significant happens, it kind of backs things up. Other than that, we'll keep moving and adding resources where we can once things break open to keep that train flowing.
Anything else, Bruce?
No.
Ray, any questions? Roxanne? Joanne?
Just, were you able to work to everyone's satisfaction in the next trip, just south of Lazy Way, where there was concerns about the elevation relative to current building elevations and stuff? Especially between Lazy Way and Sterling.
Yeah, specifically at that location, we've reached out to the property owner to find out what their plans are. We're still tracking with our plans currently as designed. And if they have any changes, we'll try to modify our plans when we get in there, in that area to build that sidewalk section. That's essentially the modifications that would have to happen.
Sure, and when, for those property owners, when might that be, wild guess? Is that coming up soon then, that conversation there? The end of their opportunity to have the conversation, let's say?
We'll be passing in front of the Century 21 property that's between Lazy and Sterling in the spring of this year. So time is of the essence. We have a design that works with the current structure and elevations, which is just fine, but if they make any changes, as Rob said, we would need to expedite that pretty quick to get that incorporated into the plans. Engineers got to do some modifications, and then we'll have to know what to build, of course.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Roxanne.
I might. The sidewalk in front of the Beach Theater, there's one that's currently there. It's underwater a great deal of the time, and I wondered if the plan is to modify that somehow so that, I don't know if you're going to tear it out and rebuild it or what the deal is there.
Yes, that section of sidewalk will be removed and replaced. In that section there, we've got a curbed roadway, and the sidewalk will be placed up there. So you'll see a significant change in grade in that area to eliminate those wet areas.
I guess I have one more question. What are you going to do about, landscaping and everything that overhangs the sidewalk? Because you can see people's landscaping already kind of growing back toward it in some areas. How will that be kept ahead of to make sure the sidewalk right away remains open?
So, yeah, that's always a tricky question with private properties and their overhanging vegetation. Typically, our rule of thumb is we like to have a minimum clearance of 8 feet over the sidewalk to any type of obstruction. That gives people that are, say, on their bicycles on the sidewalk enough clearance so that they're not hitting their head. When our maintenance folks are advised of those activities, we may go out and trim those trees, or we may contact the property owner and ask them to trim those vegetations. But my suggestion would be that people pay attention to the vegetation that they have along the right-of-way and try not to have it hang over significantly the sections of sidewalk. Down, as we get past the Flamingo area, the sidewalk widths, increase, and we've got additional clearance from the right-of-way, so that's probably less of a concern than it is from Flamingo north up through basically the Denora area or the Lover's Lane area, where there are instances where vegetation is right up against the right-of-way.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Daryl. Thank you both very much. Yes, sir.
At the last M&P, when the project was discussed, one of the questions that was asked Lee County and the staff was regarding the temporary construction fence in front of Red Coconut. I did forward an email to the principals of the Red Coconut asking them to accelerate their plans for their private fence to replace the temporary construction fence. I did have a conversation with them. They were concerned about the fact that, they would need a variance for location and for fence height, and I told them that they need not be concerned, that I think that the council be receptive to anything reasonable, and I urged them to start their process.
Great. Great. Okay, we'll move on to, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your work. We'll move, I'm just going to give you a quick update. Roger and I met with Commissioner Sandelli, and since it's relative to the road, and Roger DeJarle and Dave Harner after the TDC meeting, and we saw animated illustrations of the traffic flow redirection at the base of the bridge. It was really very, very interesting. Roger had some very good points during that conversation, and we asked them to give us, they're going to come in, was it the 18th, Roger? I think it's that second meeting in February. They're targeting to be here.
Yeah, I think, yes, they said they had to do some more sort of homework, if you
Yeah,
will.
because we gave them a list.
But they were hopeful to be able to come by the end of February. And they're working back against a date of beginning of April, when FDOT kind of needs to have a fairly good sense of what it's going to look like when you come off the ramp of the bridge, so that they can proceed with their designs and alignments. So I think everyone's aware of that. We need to sort of try to bring this issue to consensus by mid-March, so that FDOT can stay on task and
I
on
think we'll be
schedule.
able to do that when they make their presentation. I did bring up the trolley lane only, changing that, and that's an FDOT decision, not a county decision. So Roger indicated that he would be speaking to LK, and we'll continue to work on that. But I think you're going to be
Excuse me,
very
what
surprised.
was that point? What did you say?
That changing the trolley lane to being open, so it's not a trolley-only lane on the bridge. And that's it. That was the update. So they'll be here, and I think you're going to be impressed with the. But we asked them for details, because they're showing us things and saying, this is using real data. Well, Roger asked, okay, well, how many cars are going to stack here? I said, how long? What's the time length? Tell somebody how long it's going to be. And we asked him to give us real particulars, like this is the data that we collected on March 12th, 2019. So everybody would have a realistic idea of what it was. And they said they'd be able to do that. Plus, they were going to put in, just kind of a landscape design, something to give us some softscape to the presentation.
And I know, once again, I'm sure it's FDOT and county, but that every time I drive along San Carlos Boulevard, leave the island, drive down San Carlos, the traffic's all backed up trying to come on, and I think, I just want to see that trolley come down the center lane. It can move out of the way for emergency vehicles. Can you imagine the trolley with a little sign, hey, ride the trolley for free, and you wouldn't be waiting in traffic, and just, there's no reason, and it can cut in right before the bridge and then go. That just has to be done. And then better signage for When I came back from
Parking.
Sanibel the other day, I realized there is no sign. There's only signs for Fort Myers Beach. There's no signs for the parking, for Lee Tran parking, when you come from Sanibel direction either. There's no signs to even let you know it exists. And that's where it should be so busy, there should be a parking garage there. It should be so busy.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is a discussion of a funding request for a restroom facility, comfort station at Palm Avenue for the TDC Council Cycle 2021. Joanne, I'm gonna let you start the conversation because you're
Pass
prepped.
these down. So, here we go again with public bathrooms on public streets and rights of way. And I know everybody says, oh, it's just Palm Avenue. It's not just Palm Avenue. It's that you can't do it. And the town did determine, you can see here, LPA said that not compliant with inconsistent with the comp plan. The town council in 2013 confirmed that. You can see these are the who's who of this town over the last several years have all said, we don't do them. Mayor Saracita, March 2nd. Council give direction to staff that comfort stations not be placed at beach accesses within town limits, and staff may not apply for further funding. The notion of public beach restrooms at beach accesses is not supported by council. Vice Mayor Andre re-emphasized beach accesses were totally off the table. And then, Rexanne, I think you were involved in this. You were seeking 2 other alternate locations. Then there's the legal issue. Case law is clear that streets dedicated on plats do not transfer ownership of the underlying land, but rather give rise to an easement for street purposes. The public has no right to any other use than that of travel or right-of-way for which they are dedicated. Additionally, the town cannot lawfully obstruct an easement or right-of-way with buildings or structures. Then you look at the LDC and FEMA NFIP issues. Dedicated streets rights-of-way are not buildable lots, so you can't build a structure there, nor is the area seaward of the CCL in the environmentally critical zone at the end. You can't put them out in the sand. The LDC does not allow structures to be built on street rights-of-way. NFIP regulations, FEMA regulations prevent at-grade public restrooms on structures in the V zone. And then the LDC does not permit accessory structures unless they're incidental and subordinate to the principal use located on the same parcel as the principal use. And RV and trailers are only permissible uses in the village zoning district in our town. So if you go to page 2, the backup documentation for everything then follows. All of the LDC and everything, so you can see this. Page 2, I'm not trying to just cause problems here and making this a bigger conversation, but we really kind of have to deal with this. Previous town councils have said no, and when it keeps coming back and people are concerned, it keeps coming back. So how do we deal with public restrooms? Go to page 2, it's my main thought probably. So we need we have to deal with restrooms on the beach. There is an app coming from CRAB, and it's held up right now. I know CRAB's mad at me right now, apparently, but I wasn't at the meeting yesterday because I was working on all this. But there's an app that when it finally comes through the town, they'll be able to find where the restrooms are. We need signage. Just like for parking, we need signage for restrooms. We need something where at the beach access, where is your nearest restroom? And it would tell you that. But here's the existing restrooms. I made a little list. Existing restrooms, we actually have a total of 10 on the island. And if you go to Sanibel or Bonita Beach down Hickory Boulevard, they don't have any, okay? So it's not like we don't have any, folks. We have 10. The existing are Bowditch, Lynn Hall, Crescent Beach, but actually that one's not legal for FEMA and RLDC. Town Hall, Library, Bay Oaks, the pool, Chamber of Commerce should have one. They're in a building, and it's a public information thing. They should really have an open restroom there. Mound House and Newton Park. So what are other potential sites then if we look at them? And these would all be in the AE zone, so we don't have to worry about FEMA and NFIP. Under the bridge in the parking area, which I think, Roxanne, maybe you had explored before too. Center Street. Center Street, apparently back in the late 90s, early 2000, there was that conversation already. But Center Street, it can't be used for transportation. Why not do a nice restroom facility, information about the town, some bike racks, things like that. The post office, another public facility that could have a restroom nearby. Chiastero Plaza. Now I mentioned Chiastero Plaza, and I also mentioned a couple others because, and Publix, frankly, because their properties that will be coming in asking for uses or special things, and as a condition, you could have a restroom as part of that condition. So Kiostero might be one. Crescent Street, we know that TPI will be putting one in, so that's one for sure. The Ohio Street area, and this is in here, if you look, I have an aerial view back in here. Ohio Street, which
Parking
is
lot?
right across from Palm Avenue almost, it's actually where the bike shop is, and you know how the bike shop uses the right-of-way. There's some right-of-way, something through there that's an easement that's not a street easement, and it's in the AE zone. So community development might be able to, or community development or public works might be able to look at that, and they can see this. The Diamond Head parking lot itself, the one in the AE zone on the other side of the street, the town in the right-of-way has parking, metered parking. But we might do some agreement with Diamond Head where if they get the extra parking that we would normally have metered, they would put a restroom in that parking lot, a public restroom. The new fire department, if it is built at Tops, could have it. Publix, as a condition of the liquor store CPD, just be that their bathroom in their grocery store and/or liquor, but grocery store, liquor store is always open to the public. And then, as a possible condition of future development at Santini Plaza, it seems that a large plaza should have one. At any rate, even without 3 or 4 of these potential ones, the other ones are actually Center Street, Under the Bridge, Crescent Street, the fire department, and possible Diamond Head working with the town, because we could do that. That makes 15. Then if the app tells you where they are, it'd be great. And the one we're putting at Palm Avenue could go either in that Ohio Street area or in the Diamond Head parking lot area if we make that accommodation. That would put it in the AE zone, which meets FEMA regulations as well. And I did highlight the FEMA regulations here so that you could see them. Direct conversations with FEMA about them, and that public restrooms or comfort stations. One question that arises is whether restroom buildings or comfort stations can be treated differently than other types of V-zone structures and be constructed below the base flood elevation, particularly when those facilities are situated in public parks or recreation areas. The answer is no. These structures must meet the same V-zone design and construction requirements as other buildings. And then there's another conversation very recently with FEMA that says restroom buildings and comfort stations must meet the same V-zone design and construction requirements as other buildings. They cannot be constructed with the lowest floor below base flood elevation. So at any rate, my feeling is that we cannot put it where we're asking to, but there are other options that can be pursued, and especially perhaps at Diamond Head right across the street in that parking lot area to create that. If you drive by there, you really see what I mean. There's an aerial view here as well. So that's it.
Thank you.
And because we need to stop coming back about this, we need to do something for the bathrooms. And I think it's the app, it's signage, and it's a concerted plan that meets our LDC, FEMA regulations, and everything else.
Roxanne?
I don't even know where to start. Number one, I can't respond individually to all these, but I find a lot of them are not possibilities. Number two, I'm not asking to build a structure, which changes the entire discussion. Number three, if some of these are possibilities, hooray, I want more bathrooms. But there's nothing wrong with having a bathroom at the Palm Avenue location where I have requested. It was there before. It wasn't a problem. I literally received 0 feedback in a negative fashion from anyone in the town regarding this. And believe me, I go out and talk about it because it's one of my pet issues. I received lots of positive feedback from people who said, hooray, we need a bathroom. Thank you for bringing this up. So I got 0 negative. In addition, I'd like to add that I went out and took a look at the Crescent Park bathrooms. noticed they were in a little bit of disrepair. I emailed Jesse Lavender about it and said, hey, TDC's coming up, maybe you guys want to ask for new bathrooms there because yours are looking a little shoddy. He answered me immediately, we're going to ask for it. They're putting new ones in there. So they seem to find no problem with it as well.
What's the zone there? Do we know? Is it the same? Is that VE also? Okay.
So without responding to all of the things that Joanne has said, and by the way, when my name is included on here, some of these times I voted against what you're indicating. So putting my name on here as being a person who was in favor of not doing it is slightly inaccurate. So I strongly feel that we should be putting in the bathrooms that are movable, that are in the proposal that we have received, and I won't say anything further.
Ray, where are you on this?
I'm all for adding additional restrooms where it makes sense, where it's feasible. I'm of a mind, as Rexanne is, as these movable types that, in case of storms and what have you, that can be taken out or of course built to withstand them, I guess. But in general and principle, I am for adding restrooms on the beach. I think there is a need for that.
Thank you. Bruce?
I agree with that. The idea of having them on the bay side of Estero, to me, are not nearly as important as having them on the beach side of Estero. And to have people running across Estero to hurry to the restroom and get across Estero and then have to go a long ways is not real convenient either. So.
A question?
Sure, go ahead.
Of the attorney. Can you please opine about the dedication of street right-of-ways and the structures and trailers in right-of-ways dedicated for street purposes?
Generally, the use that a government can put to property that's been dedicated is whatever's evidenced in the face of the plat. And so without taking a look, because the Pavis letter that's attached in here is incomplete and doesn't have the case law that they cite to. So this is the first I've seen of this issue. But in general, there are limitations on what the government can do with dedicated right-of-way, as evidence on the intent of on the face of the plat as to what use it's to be put to. But uses that are not inconsistent with that general purpose can be done. We'd have to take a look at the face of the plat, as well as the specific, the entirety of the letter from the Pavis law firm for me to opine whether or not they are correct in what they say or not. But at this point in time, it's a possible, depending upon looking into the specific language at the face of the plat.
That answer your question, Joanne? You're going to look for the Pavis letter?
Yeah, I have more on those. And it does not address the fact that it is not allowed. We're not part of the FEMA CRS system. It is not, it's not allowed. I mean, it is, I don't think you folks understand how much of a problem this is to people who live on the beachfront. There is no more of a right to put that toilet on that street than there is to put it on the street in front of your house on Washington.
I'm not asking to put it in a residential neighborhood. I have clearly said this location. I haven't said down the beach any further than this location.
But this is a dedicated public street, and it's in the VE zone, and you have an option to put it in the AE zone and meet FEMA CRS regulations. We shouldn't be doing this. And this town previously opined, both the LPA and previous town council has opined this, and it keeps coming back. And it shouldn't keep coming back.
Joanne, I think there is, I went back and read, because Roxanne was on the council when we talked about this, and she's right, she disagreed. And for Ray, you weren't there, and I don't think you were either, Bruce. This was a really hot issue, and it was a hot issue primarily relative to the Sterling beach access, that neighborhood, because the original CRAB committee intent was to put them at multiple beach accesses down the island, where we could, you could see that that was absolutely encroaching into residential neighborhoods. But if you'll remember, because you were here when we talked about Palm Avenue, and my comments at that meeting relative to removing the Palm Avenue station, I objected to that Palm Avenue station being removed because I didn't see it the same as I saw Sterling or Connecticut Street or any other access out of what I'm going to call the downtown core area. There was a comment that people got upset about, made at the council relative to, well, people can use business bathrooms. Well, part of the reason why businesses are required to have restrooms is for public use, but not public in general, customer use. So it isn't, I have a restroom at Local Color, but it isn't open to anyone in Times Square to come in to use. It's for my customers. And that's the same for every business on the island. So I think obviously there's three people who are saying move it forward. I think that moving it forward, I think, as Roxanne is indicating, you have to be very specific about where it's going to be, because I'm going to tell you at the next meeting, you'll have 40 people here telling you that they don't want it in their neighborhood, and it instantly makes people feel like it will be a slippery slope of where they're going to go. And this is a very specific
And that, well, okay,
question.
so that being said, there's two things then. Will the town, prior to placing that, check how this street is platted and see how it's platted? And get an okay from FEMA to put that there?
Well, I also, that's fine with me, but I'd also like to ask, and I think you bring up Roxanne brought up a good point of, is this something that has been built, or is this a movable kiosk, for lack of better words? So I'm just, look, we're going to lose this argument.
Right,
So,
but the idea that it's built or not built is irrelevant. If you look at FEMA regulations, it doesn't matter. And you look at the LDC, it doesn't matter. It's the VE zone. The trailer ones are not allowed in the VE zone, and this was an exchange just recently. It says, town's trying to put trailer bathrooms in the public access areas. They'd be hooked up to city sewer, could be moved in the event of a storm. And they say, the technical bulletin says these comfort stations are not exempt from BFE. Am I reading this correctly? And the FEMA says that is correct. Restroom buildings and comfort stations must meet the same V design and construction requirements of the buildings, so they cannot be constructed with the lowest floor below. And so even if the town considers them to be mobile, and they said that's correct, they would need to be constructed in compliance with NFIP building regulations. So I just want to clearly define that. Now, but it
Excuse me,
seems to me.
Joanne, is that in that packet here?
Yes, it is. And now it seems to me, though, that the three people, I just want to further this discussion because it's a big discussion and it's important. I'm not saying bathrooms aren't important. I'm trying to come to a solution that will work so this doesn't just keep getting kicked down the street. But it seems that a statement was made, we need more bathrooms at beach accesses, and you acted like plural. And yet you're saying, oh, this is just this one downtown zone.
When I went back and looked at the previous discussions, because they were very emotional, very heated discussions, this particular location at the Palm Avenue, there were no complaints, there was nobody had any question, and it's a highly trafficked area. So to me, this is much like the Crescent Beach units that the county has placed there, I look at those the same. I look at something on Hercules completely different, or Connecticut, or Flamingo, or any other beach access outside of what I'm going to call the commercial corridor.
Okay, that's you. Rexanne, do you look at this differently?
I do.
So you would not put them at the other beach accesses?
I would
This
not.
is the only one?
I would not. I have said that multiple times.
Okay, I just want it on the record.
And,
Ray?
and again, I received not one negative comment from anybody in the community.
And-
And
and
I was
I-
out talking to people.
And I did, and it's probably because people know,
Then they should have
That's
come
the
to me.
topic.
I'm the one whose
tell them.
mind they needed to change.
I'll tell them to call you. I'll be gone, it won't be my trouble in
But I
the
think it's-
future.
I
But,
think
but Ray,
What you're asking is important.
Ray, how about you?
Well, I'm trying to think this through here, and what the objection is that would require the restrooms to begin with. Now, if you're a beachfront property owner, and I lived on the beach for a lot of years, and I saw a lot of things going on out on the beach that wasn't the most pleasant thing to see on the beach. And so it's a question of whether you want to see that, or you want to see the people using the restroom, what it was meant, where they were meant to go. So if the objection is that we don't want to see these people out defecating on the beach, well then you got to provide them somewhere to either that or open up your homes for these people to come in and use the facilities. You can't have it both ways in my mind.
So you're saying that people who have $2 million houses on the beachfront.
I don't care.
whose-
Well, I don't care
Who
what-
have a street, now wait a minute, who have a street that is dedicated to access their driveways. Let's talk about Sterling, because they talked about it before. That is the street access to 4 homes, just the same as a street access to anybody else's home. That's
Not
what it's there
asking to
for.
put it on
I
Sterling,
know, but
Joanne.
you're done. I was talking to Ray.
I am done.
Ray, no, you know what I mean.
No,
No, I'm sorry, you know what I mean.
She's trying to clarify
I'm with
whether or
Ray.
not,
Now-
for the future council, the next group
Yeah.
after us, when this would actually take place, would enter into the conversation about placing them at other beaches.
So even though it's not
we
allowed
just
by
say
the
no.
LDC, it's not allowed by state definition of a public right-of-way, and it's not allowed by FEMA, you would do that besides somebody's $2 million
Joanne,
house.
I disagree with your interpretations, but I'm not going to argue with you about
You're
it.
really trying
But
to,
I was talking to Ray right
But you
now.
keep saying it is not allowed, it is not allowed, and I disagree with you.
So you think
So-
that the dedicated streets for public purposes mean we could put a toilet in front of your house or anybody else's house, $1 million
That's not what I'm
house
saying.
on a street?
That's not what I'm saying. Don't put words in my mouth.
Okay. And Bruce, sorry, I just want to get everybody on the record.
I do not recommend them in residential neighborhoods, houses, next to houses on beach accesses. I disagree with that. I like the idea of when, like, a new parking lot, if there was a new parking lot, that might be a requirement to get that. I've been in favor of that. In fact, I should have said that when they put that Mango Street in. I talked to the guy, and he says, well, the guy across the street's got a restroom, and he lets us use it, and our people can go there, but that would have been a good time to raise that, actually.
And the last interesting point I'll make, because, I mean, this is a serious issue for residents of this island of property values. 2 things. I walk to the bay. I'd like a bathroom at the bay. So people at the end of the bays, let's put a bathroom right beside their houses, so when I go fishing, I can go to the bathroom in your neighborhood.
That's not what we're
But
saying,
That's not what's
Joanne.
being said. and I
Okay,
think-
I'm just saying.
I know, but I think that discussion, that line of comment is what creates the hysteria that will have 40 people in here saying, oh my God, they're going to put it on my street. And that's not what's being said here. What's being said is specifically Palm Avenue because it's in the commercial corridor, period, nothing else.
And
Nothing
if
else.
we could move on with the conversation, there were different options presented to us. And for the record, I would go with the simplest option. I don't think it's necessary to have showers out there. I don't want to build a structure. I want the simplest option, which is bathrooms. So if I could move the discussion forward down this way, which of the 3 options are preferred?
I agree with you. There shouldn't be a shower. It should just be a restroom facility, period. Yes.
Fine with that.
Me too.
Okay. Any other discussion on this?
Oh, so let's just say that we had a majority that was in agreement with it, but we still have the question of the plot and FEMA.
Yes,
Right.
because.
That's up to staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It obviously
Right.
can't happen if
Exactly.
those things aren't approved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
So, just stepping back a little bit, the timeliness of this discussion is whether or not the council would like us to put together a grant application package for the TDC. What I'm hearing is, based on your discussion today, yes, one at Palm,
And no others?
portable, minimal, is what I'm hearing. If in doing that, through either the county's due diligence or ours, with regard to any limitation that may have been overlooked in the past, we'll bring that to your attention.
Very good. Thank you, Roger. Okay, we'll move on to the fertilizer
I just want to
ordinance.
make one last comment.
Okay.
Excuse me. Joanne, I'm a little taken aback by what you're trying to do to me here as far as putting me on the record. So as long as we're going to get on the record, I will get on the record. I have not heard a groundswell of interest from people coming up to me demanding public restrooms on the beach. I haven't seen that, nor heard it. So really, to me, it's not that important. But to say that I would be in favor of, because I don't want this to go out in the newspaper, oh, Murphy's in favor of putting restrooms next to $2 million homes, because that's what you said that I said, and I didn't say that. Okay? So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Now, if people down in the south end or wherever in certain neighborhoods, if they felt that there's an overwhelming reason to petition the town for a restroom on their beach access, well, then we'd listen to them. I would listen to them. Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I? So, just so there's no misunderstanding.
I appreciate your clarification.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir?
just one last thing. Chelsea would like to just state one other thing about the TDC application.
Chelsea? Good morning.
So,
And Chelsea, thank you for responding to Lindy. That was really nice to shoot.
So one of the things that we actually applied for.
we're going to have to go over there.
It's,
Okay, yes, we're good. So one of the things that we actually applied for this current fiscal year is beach erosion monitoring. Lee County, we asked TDC, it was $8,000. We asked what Coastal Engineering does is they survey the north and the south end, and in order for us to make up the middle, we typically in the past 3 years have paid for that. We actually received TDC funding this current fiscal year, and we failed to mention that in this application, and if that is something that council would like us to apply for, we'd be more than happy to do that.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we recommend that we continue that program.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just FYI, that the Tourist Development Council recommended funding $1.4 million for emergency nourishment of the Blind Pass area on Sanibel. Because, yep. Okay, we'll move on to the next item now, if this is all discussed. The fertilizer ordinance. And these are proposed changes to the town's fertilizer ordinance. Roger, you have any comments on this?
So,
Oh! Somewhat related.
so,
We won't even count the ways.
Madam Mayor, members of council, as you recall, we've had a committee working very hard on this subject. We, as we had been working on various drafts with them, we had to take a hard look at the state law and certain preemptions in state law that affected how we approach this subject, as well as the glyphosate subject. as an aside, the state legislature continues to believe that they should create exemptions at the state level rather than respecting and encouraging local control, but that's saying what it is. By working with the committee and working with the town, we were able to craft some changes that would allow us to increase the focus on people's application of fertilizer, whether it's done privately or through a company, to protect our nearshore waters. And this ordinance, as drafted, does meet the curtailing criteria established by the state, but we believe it's a step in the right direction, and I know this council has stated on many occasions that you're concerned about water quality and that we should be doing what we can locally as an example for the state and others. So I believe these proposed changes are a step in that direction, and we welcome any feedback or suggestions of how we may improve it beyond of what you see in front of you.
Roxanne?
I have a preliminary question. It appears that your proposal starts on page 17 in the packet, but it doesn't tell me, is this in totality replacing what we have? I don't see like X'd out sections. So we're going to delete our entire fertilizer ordinance and replace it in total?
And replace it with this. Assuming the council gives us direction to continue to proceed, the next step would be for us to put the ordinance in ordinance format, strike out and underline. It will be a replacement in totality of the existing regulations with this new proposed ordinance. You all may recall to add that members of the advisory board brought forward a copy of an ordinance from Seminole County that had some of these more stringent regulations. And so that's some of those, that more stringent provisions have been incorporated in this. The State Department of Consumer Affairs and Agriculture has asked that once the final draft is put together, that we forward it to that agency for its review and determination that it does not go beyond what is authorized by state law with regard to preemption, which we obviously will do that.
A question then on page 19, and I just bring this up for discussion. I was contacted by a member of the League of Women Voters who had worked on this issue way back the first time when the town had implemented it, and there had been a proposal for 25 feet rather than 15, and I'm told by this person that other localities do use 25 rather than 15. She was disappointed the last time that the town went with the 15 and would prefer a greater amount. I will admit that I have not researched it to know for sure that other localities use 25, but she does seem to be a person who knows quite a bit about this, having monitored it for the League of Women Voters. So I just bring that up for discussion, whether we want to increase from 15 to 25, and whether we would be allowed to do that or not by the state, I don't know. That I just bring it up for discussion.
Roxanne, what I didn't understand was the fertilizer-free zones and the low-maintenance zones. So the fertilizer-free zone is mandatory, but the low-maintenance zone is not mandatory.
Right.
What do you get to do? Choose which one you want to adhere to? Because one is saying 15 feet from a pond, stream, water, blah, 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 and then the voluntary 10-foot low-maintenance is strongly recommended for any pond, stream, watercourse, lake, blah, 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 or the top of a seawall, which of course would then include canals. I don't understand these.
I think the one, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the fertilizer-free zone relates to fertilizer. The maintenance zone, if you look at the last sentences,
Okay,
it's
so-
about your mowing clippings that go flying into that's
Okay.
the difference. So it's
Okay.
your maintaining the yard as compared to the application of chemicals.
Okay.
I think those are the two different
I
things.
guess because they say something about spraying,
And
I just assumed it was, okay, got it.
I agree with Roxanne. I'd love to see the 25 feet if we can, whatever we can. I mean,
If it was 25 feet, well, even 15, 25 feet would have canal front homes, most canal front homes would not be able to fertilize their yard.
And I don't.
Okay.
There's no need to fertilize my yard, and there's no need for most people to fertilize their yards. It's, you know, we need to be doing more native plantings, we need to be doing more xeriscaping. Growing grass right up to your canal wall is not a good thing. It's not, grass doesn't grow well here, it's not meant to. So that would be my response.
And I think the people have to, go ahead.
I was
Bruce,
just
you're
gonna say,
leaning
I
forward.
happen to like grass, so I'm not of the
You
kind.
mean
I
your
don't-
like grass
yard?
too,
You
but
mean
I-
your yard?
Yes,
Oh,
my
just-
yard. I mean
Just wanna make
sodded
sure,
grass.
for the
I
record.
don't like the scuzzy looking, thorny looking
breakfast.
stuff.
Too much coffee. Roxanne, I
s-
totally
you-
agree, I'm sorry.
But Bruce, even if you have grass, you don't have to fertilize it.
I suppose. I don't know.
I know that, you know, some people will look at this as going overboard, but we have to always remember, you know, the red tide may naturally occur, but the kinds of things that have happened to us with extreme events
feed it.
are because we're feeding it. And if we have to do something about it. And as a barrier island, if we don't set the example, I mean, we're water all the way around.
I have a question, and I don't know the answer to this, maybe our environmentalist does. But they talk about not fertilizing in the rainy season, but some people suggest it's good to fertilize in the rainy season because the plant absorbs it quicker in the rainy season and it doesn't run off as much.
About those tigers.
Morning, Chad Sheets, environmental staff. That is correct. If you're growing grass, it will absorb the fertilizer greater during the summer months.
So doesn't that seem odd compared to this?
Problem is proper application. People put on too much, it washes off. If I remember the stats that we got from Penny Jarrett's project, one of the worst places around the island for what appeared to be chemicals that came from fertilizers was the lagoon on the south end.
It's your fault.
That's not my fault, because I've got swales and barriers and all kinds of stuff.
Well, can
But,
we,
you know, I never did see that. I was gone when that came out. And I
You got an
missed- I
email.
seen that. Did I?
Yeah,
Yep.
Oh,
we all got
I'll
it.
have to look for that again.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Can we ask Chad what he thinks about Rick
Yeah,
Sands'
the
comment
15.
about 25 feet
15
on
to 25.
page 19?
Right, so Seminole County ordinance had 15 feet. That's what I based it on. I'll leave it to your recommendation.
Our current, I think, is 15, but
Our
I was
current is-
told that other places have 25.
Our current is 3.
3?
The state model ordinance is 10, and Seminole County was more stringent with 15.
Know if other places have 25?
I haven't seen that. 15 is the most I've seen, but I haven't done a comprehensive review.
I think 15 is reasonable.
It's reasonable. I mean, it's 5 big steps away from the water.
So, Madam Mayor, you know, when we create an ordinance of this type, you know, our primary focus is going to be to educate people, but it becomes like the speed limit. You know, everyone's going to go certain, whatever number of miles over an hour over the speed limit they think they can go without getting a ticket. So if you say X, they're going to go a couple of feet beyond that. Anyway, so, because they want their lawns to look good if they have a lawn. So, you know, I think this is a way for us to create an ordinance that will pass state review and create a situation where the council is clearly trying to make an effort to address, you know, where we can, you know, everyone's sensitivity and awareness of the water quality issues and what we do as human beings to exacerbate the problem, so.
Roger, did Murph discuss 15 versus 25 at all?
Well,
Rexanne?
I can't tell you what the latest discussions were.
This was before my time with him.
I can tell you at one point, they were using a measurement and saying, let's use this measurement in case the council makes it, makes it more flexible. So they were looking at it from, let's set it at 0 in case the council wants it, decides to move it a little bit. But I think everyone has rallied around this concept that to make progress and make the situation better, the
This
best
is
thing to do
reasonable.
is to follow the lead of the Seminole County ordinance.
Okay,
May I ask one more question of Chad?
Sure.
And it builds off of Bruce, your concern about the rainy season and that application. And Chad, would you say the reason for that is because, number one, it can wash away quickly because of the heavy rains? Even though there's absorption, there's also the pooling and flooding of heavy rains, number one, and then the ground gets saturated, and so that the absorption can be impacted. In any given year, it's hard to know what the absorption would be. Is that accurate, or how would you explain that to Bruce, who I understand Bruce's concern? And
Yeah, it's the greater likelihood of runoff. You also see some provisions in there for if a heavy rain event is likely, as predicted by the National Weather Service. That would also be a prohibited period. So that's definitely the concern of runoff into the MS4 and canals, Gulf, et cetera.
thank you, Chad.
Yeah, just to put a picture in your mind, if you think about it, everyone's house is a little bit higher than the street or whatever they back up to in their side yards. So it's going to flow away from the house to something. So if that something happens to be a canal, it's going to flow to that once the ground gets saturated.
Or the street or anything, it all
Right.
goes to the.
Well, if it goes in the street, it goes in our drain system, which then also goes out there, so that's all not
Okay,
good.
so is there any interest in changing this from 15 to 25? Roxanne, yes?
Hey, if we're moving from 3 to 15, I'm thrilled.
Yeah,
So, and I thank everybody who did the hard work on this. This is so important. Please, let's move it forward.
all right, so we're going to settle with
agree.
15. Okay.
yeah, I
John?
agree. Thanks to
Well,
Murph. Thanks.
my comment was going to be that state preemption, and a lot of times, is the result of someone doing something already. So the ordinances, the locations that Councilmember Hustross is mentioning may have predated the model ordinance that the staff said is 10. So every step that we go beyond 10, we have to justify it to the state in order to be able to meet the preemption language.
Okay.
Seminole County's already gotten 15 approved.
All right, well, thank you Seminole County, and thank you Marine Resource Task Force.
And Mr. Herron, thank you.
And everybody who worked on this. So we'll can we move this to our next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, so that'll be February, that'll
No,
be
no.
January 21st.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
that's kind of tight, we'll do our best. No, it'll definitely be on the first meeting in February, but we'll do our best.
Well, this is kind of a cut and paste, isn't it, at this point? We're not changing anything? I just
It
been
is,
trying
it's
to,
just,
something easy.
yeah, I hear you, the deadline for the agenda was last night, but we'll do our best after this
Okay.
meeting.
Thank you.
I'm willing to get my packet a day later if you can get this in.
Fair enough.
Let's just get it in. The next item on the agenda.
Wait.
Yes.
May I ask another question?
Sure.
While we got Chad up here, and I found the email. Thank you for that, because
From
I was
Penny.
very curious about that. Specifically to the lagoon, because Rexanne's right, it didn't look really good there, but it was also very low in salinity. So it tells me that it's not getting any flow in there like the rest of the island's getting flow. Would that be a good answer to why it's maybe has a more higher content of these chemicals?
It's definitely plausible, and then a lot of runoff sitting in there, rainwater runoff. So, yeah.
Which obviously, if you don't have the stuff running in there, it's not a problem because the water's not flowing. But the point is, the water needs to flow in that natural lagoon, and it's not flowing because we get buildup of sandbars and stuff out there that keeps the water from flowing in there, and we have a lot of manatees and dolphins in there all the time. And And over Christmas, if you didn't hear, there was 3 dead manatees in the lagoon
Oh, no.
in 7 days.
Did
They
they
don't-
do necrot? No?
They don't know that they were killed in the lagoon, but that's where they ended up. So
that's
because
sad.
they travel in there quite frequently, so they came home to die or something, I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Chad. We'll move on to beach renourishment project and the due diligence. Roger?
So we received a request from some of the North End Beach owner properties that they were concerned that the loss of sand there was getting to the point where, due to the lead time necessary for a beach renourishment project, that they felt it was time to initiate that effort. We've looked at it, and we agree that we are approaching the time where it needs to be looked at. As you, I think most of you are aware, it's a very technical process to review and then make the case for the need for renourishment. We have provided a potential consultant agreement for the purposes of conducting that initial assessment and documentation of the need for us. And if the council agrees that the need is there, we will bring the agreement to the council for approval so we can move forward and kick off that project.
Okay, Joanne?
Just one question, or 2 questions, actually, probably for Chad. I support this, by the way. I think this is how the North End has traditionally been taken care of, especially with the dredgings from Matanzas Pass. And I know you have to determine the amount of fill you need and whether there's enough in the pass or what you'll be doing. But I'm assuming there's an ECL line in place there, so that's all set, and it's still in place from the previous project. And this will just be simple construction easements as last time? That project, as compared to the one they tried to do the rest of the island, which was federal easements, these will be simple construction easements for the property owners, I would assume, which makes it easy and...
We don't know at this point, but we aware of the problems of the past.
Right.
And it's our intention to carry off the project that way, and if it can't be carried off that way, we'll be the first to let you know.
Okay, because historically, they have been simple construction easements, and at the other islands, they've used simple construction easements. So I want it to be as easy as possible and fair as possible to the property owners as well. So I just mentioned that in passing. And then, I was wondering, any comment, Chad, at the last time that this was done, they added the groin at the North End. That was in addition to the regular renourishment. And there was a Army Corps report that I don't think I have with me in my packet that talked about, they were hoping that groin would reduce the erosion, not eliminate it, but reduce it. And I'm wondering what impact it really had. The aerial views, it looks like they talked about which direction the sand would move now and da-da-da. I'm wondering a couple questions if you happen to know. Did that slow down the filling in of the federal channel, number one? And number 2, how did it impact the shape of the northern end of Bowditch, which had accreted tremendously? And it looks to me on aerial views like it's actually retreated, like Bowditch Point around the north end is getting smaller. And I'm wondering then, did it influence how long the renourishment itself stayed steady? So I guess what I'm interested in, what was the impact of that groin, so we've learned something from it and how effective it's working?
I don't think Chad would necessarily know that, but I think if we go forward and hire this consultant, part of their analysis would be not only how do we move forward and renourish, but how do we do that in a fashion that prolongs the need to renourish again after that.
Right. Since that was the intent, it would just be interesting to know if it has served its intent and if there's a modification that might serve it better. That would be my only question. So thank you, but I support this.
Any questions, Roxanne?
No, the request seems to be to proceed with the first step, and I would be in favor of that.
Ray, any questions or comments?
Questions? I'm all in favor of the renourishment.
Does TDC pay for this, or would they?
Well, clearly, once we have the consultant's report documenting the need, we would go to the TDC and solicit their financial support for the project.
Well, I was asking whether they pay for
Whether they pay for the assessment.
the assessment, yeah.
I don't believe they
Don't know.
necessarily will do that. I think we document the need and then, you know, theoretically, the actual project then gets approved and you get funded from that point forward.
As we said in the strategy sessions, to me, the town is all about the beach, so I'm for the beach, so.
We still have over $100,000 in our beach renourishment fund, I believe. Is that correct? Is that where this money will come out of? We had over $1 million, money was moved, and I think we still have over 100,000, I thought, in that fund.
Well, I believe that the $17,000 is not at issue for us. You know, I don't know that we would go into that reserve necessarily, pay for it unless it became necessary. But if it became necessary, we would dip into the reserve.
Can I just ask, when they, I'm sorry, Joanne, were you finished?
I am done,
Okay.
thank you.
When they look at the north end, and I appreciate the north end property owners being vigilant on this as well, but when they look at the north end, do they look at the whole island at all, or do they just look at that one piece?
I believe they look between the parks, I think is what they're going to be looking at,
They look, did you say?
between the parks.
So Lynn Hall to Bowditch. I mean, I'm on the record a million times saying, you know, in an ideal world, I am not a beach renourishment person. But once it starts, you have to continue it. There's just, and even when it starts someplace else, I mean, Captiva, Sanibel, it all affects, the sand shifts, so I support it completely. So, all right, good. We'll move on with that. Will we need to have this come before us for a council vote?
No, ma'am, this is within my purchasing authority.
Wonderful.
With your support today, I'll move it forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roger. Next item is the
Break.
town.
Next item is break.
What?
Break.
Break?
Break.
All right. We'll have a 5-10 minute break. Be right back. I know you're on pins and needles. It's 11:13, we're back in session. Next item on the agenda is a discussion of town surplus properties. And I said to Joanne before the meeting started, I said, how did this get back up here? Ironically, last night, Summer Stockton texted me and said, how's this discussion with properties going? And I said, no, it's nothing to do with that. And because I just glanced at the agenda. When I glanced at the agenda, I thought we were talking about computers or cars or I don't know what, and turns out here we are again with this. So let's see if we can dispose of this topic. But Roger, I guess what I wanted to ask was, looking at agenda management, did this come back up because of a comment or when we talked about acquiring public lands for beach access? Is that why this is here? Or do you see that as separate? Because to me, they're very separate.
I don't really remember the comment. I don't know if the clerk does or not, but,
It's the only thing
you
I
know,
could put it to.
yeah, I also received a email from Ms. Stockton, and I sent her a note that, not, whatever her concern is, not to object yet, because it's just a general, these meetings are just discussions, they're not action per se, so,
Well, much like the comfort stations, this is a recurring theme. So let's see if we could resolve this today. All right? So, Roger, what you need us to do is,
well, so I think, there are a couple of topics I want to say that these properties tend to come up with. One is a future upland facility for the marina operation. And I'm sure that there are others that at times have floated through your minds as, can we use one of our properties for this or that or the other thing? Most of our properties are, as you know, are right-of-ways. Some of them are paved. An example of those are the beach accesses. They're paved up to the beach, and you have the beach after that. We have others that are unimproved, and that they're, in any fashion, they're just a strip of land between
right,
two houses, et cetera. So it's not like we own a vacant lot, and I'll just use the example of the Bay Oaks lot.
I'm Virginia.
Well, I would say like the Bay Oaks lot that we recently
right.
acquired, it's
Okay.
really like sort of a defined lot that if the town didn't have a purpose for it, we could sell it or do something with it. It's an asset of the town, but we could theoretically sell it, because if we weren't using it for a purpose, in this case, we are using it for a purpose. But most of these are not things you could sell. You either use them for their public purpose, either current or future. And if you make a determination that there is no public purpose currently or in the future, typically when these rights of way are granted, they have a reverter clause, which says that if you don't use it for that public purpose, it gets
to the
returned to the adjacent
Right.
property owners.
Correct.
So typically, in pretty much all the governments I've worked for, they're generally retained pretty much in perpetuity, unless the two property owners come forward with a request for abandonment, which case the council would do its due diligence to be absolutely certain that there's no current or future public purpose, and then make a determination about a particular
Yep.
or a specific one of these. So while
Oh, gosh, it's driving me
numerically it
crazy.
appears that we have a lot of them, they're generally just these are dedicated unimproved or dedicated improved rights of way.
Okay, so for example, Old San Carlos Boulevard, there's nothing to be done here. Am I correct?
My only comment is, I was wondering why this came forward, because we have the town has a perpetual easement for the public right-of-way along that waterfront. From Resolution 0212, the agreement where Snug Harbor and Nervous Nelly
Exactly.
was built. So, I mean, in all sincerity, the town isn't using that. It's blocked off, and the restaurant actually has tables out on it, and that's supposed to be open to the public. So I'm sort of glad this is on here, because we've talked about this in the past, how we going to get that open, because we do have the easement, and that is the access to the waterfront that's so desirable on the Back Bay.
So that's one of the sort of ancillary types of, how this stuff creeps into the conversation, like swell type thing. That comes up from time to time. But, so, if you want to take Council Champ's, concern and see through the resolution here, if there is one here today, and then if any of the other councils have a question about one or more of these properties, to work that through the resolution,
Okay.
might be the best way to proceed.
Okay, so Old San Carlos, Joanne, your concern here is that easement across the bayfront, which of course then connects under the docks and,
And
back in the olden days.
and
was meant
redoing
to be a-
Bayfront Park too, it all ties it in together with our design right now. So that easement, that perpetual easement is sort of critical to the public use of that Bayfront area.
But no disposition of this property,
No.
correct?
I don't know why it's even called surplus. Why would
Yeah,
that be called a surplus?
I have no idea either, but does everybody agree that that needs to be, needs to be looked at in the design of the Bayfront Park?
Agreed.
Agree.
Okay. Palermo Circle,
Madam Mayor, before you move off that one, can I, as you, I think all of the councilors know, and I know you know, Madam Mayor, that for similar situations such as the ones we have in Times Square, we have marks of delineation in the ground, delineating, where you're sort of can put a table and where you can't put a table. At the location Councilor Champ mentioned, we don't have that. And if that's something that the council would like us to engage in that conversation with that particular property owner and find out and work with them to develop a way to clearly delineate that walkway, so it's easier for them and easier for us to maintain as being open to the public, we'll be glad to do that if you so instruct us to do that.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Agree.
okay, there you go. Palermo Circle. So this even has a little box here that says the town needs clarification as to legality. Well, do we have clarification as to legality? If not, why are we looking at it?
I guess I would say, I would like to instruct our attorney to get clarification as to legality, so we know whether we need to talk about it or not.
This has just
Can
been
I?
on here so
a little more?
long.
I got the aerial view of this, and it does show that there's, the end of the street goes through there, that we do have the easement, the current aerial view from LIPA. And the people in that neighborhood are concerned because that easement has always been the way that those who are not on the waterfront in Palermo Circle, that is their sort of access view to the water, that they go out there, the kids and the people can walk out along that strip. So the neighborhood does use that. They do consider that to be an open part of their neighborhood that they utilize. And they specifically asked, actually, for me to ask you, Mr. Herron, is there such a legal thing on page 52 of saying that a property can be absorbed? They say, how does a private property can't absorb public property? Is that even a legal term?
That is correct. That is correct. You cannot acquire public property through what's commonly referred to as adverse possession. Public property stays public property forever until such time as either the government transfers ownership to a third party or vacates the right of the property or otherwise transfers it.
And once again, this is one of those things where the neighborhood was concerned because it had come up before, they thought it was resolved, and here it is back, and they're saying this had been absorbed. And from their point of view, this is their neighborhood asset, so. whatever you wanna
Absorbed
say.
doesn't mean that we have lost legal title. It's just saying usage has been abated because of landscaping, et cetera, et cetera. I think they're misinterpreting the word absorbed.
But what they're saying is, though, that the usage has not been abated, that they use it all the time. So I just enter that because that's what people on Palermo Circle told me.
So this is another policy issue the council may or may not want to take up, and that is that where we have these things, these properties, and where the adjacent property owners are utilizing them or otherwise making them appear as they're part of their property, even though, if you look at a survey, they're not. Does the council want us to go in there and put in access control or some other type of physical evidence that their property stops there and our property starts on the other side of, whether it's a ballard or fence or a rail or something?
Could we start with the town needs clarification as to legality? Do we or do we not have clarification as to the legality of this access?
That's coming from, I believe, from Chelsea. I'll have to see if she's available and ask her about that.
No,
But I think it's very clear that we either have a dedicated unapproved right-of-way there, or we don't. It's not, it's very easy to establish.
To your question directly, at this point, no, Mayor. This is the first I've seen of this as well. When the agenda item was produced, I generally, review them, obviously for legal sufficiency. Staff has not brought to my attention that there's a question of ownership of any of these areas. If there is, and it is the direction of this council for me and.
But you know what, John, not to interrupt you, but this particular access right here, Roxanne will recall, it came up 5 years ago. It continues to come up, and I'd like to resolve it.
I will, that's my direction. I am now aware of it and will address ownership of all these parcels to the extent that there's any question.
Thank you, John. Chelsea, can you tell me why this is here, why this says this?
Let's give her a second to read it.
And while Chelsea's reading, I can tell you, it's not the only one. Amberjack says the
I
same
know,
thing.
exactly, and Amberjack
So-
I thought was long ago resolved.
Belongs to Lee County, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, now they're saying they're not sure again.
The Palermo one, this is literally the exact same presentation that was given 3, 4, I don't know how many years ago. But since then, that's an easement, that is a public easement.
Okay, it's a public easement, period. Is there a way for you to memorialize that someplace, write it on a wall, so that the people in this neighborhood don't have to think that there's something going on with that at any given time? And is it clear that that's a public easement to the adjacent property owners?
We'd have to look into that to see if it's just a public easement or for that specific or for the plat property owners. But
Wait, back up. Is it a public easement? Are you saying it's an easement for only 371 and 331?
Public easement. We're actually putting up a sign in the next week or two. It's on order. It is an access easement.
Okay. Okay.
And Roger asked us a specific question as to whether we would prefer to see something put in there. It would seem to make sense to me that we should, because that, the sign gets lost or whatever, the fact that we would have some rope and bollard or,
Yeah, I think if you look at Virginia picture, for example, you'll see that the adjacent owners have sort of, maybe it's not Virginia, it was one of the others. I'm trying to remember which one it was.
It was
but-
Virginia.
Yeah, it is Virginia. You can kind of see that there's been some absorption by the adjacent properties, use by the adjacent properties, which there may not be anything wrong with, but to the casual passerby, they say, well, I thought that was public property, and now it's not. Well, it is. It's just they're using it because it's unimproved and it's not delineated.
Right.
So the question is, you want to embark upon a program to start through signage and/or some type of boundary indicator that these are town properties.
Yes.
I do too, and if I might, I had previously made a list of then all the ones, the streets I went down, aerial views. And so you've got Palermo, Otsego, Miramar, Virginia, Pearl, Delmar, Fairweather, Connecticut. Bayside has its own neighborhood park. Hercules, Coconut, they've improved. Bayview, Bayland, Williams, Mound, and then Amberjack, who knows, on that one, we'll get to it. But actually, my point, or a question, I guess, would be if we're doing this at Palermo and don't we do the same at all of them? Treat them all the same, whatever that is, if it's a little sign, if it's a trash can, if it's something, whatever council or community or public works wants to do, but it seems like maybe it could be something that would be consistent. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right, because then it's decided, and 3 years from now, they don't have to discuss this again.
And I would argue for more than just a sign, because signs get stolen, they disappear. It would be nice to make it consistent so that it sort of looks like the beach accesses do, where there's some delineation.
Maybe it's a shell path and
Well,
ropes and bollards or something.
Yeah, I'm more than the ground, I'm thinking of something.
Something on the sides.
Vertical,
To
a
delineate
vertical
it.
delineation. And I would say for all of them as well, not just.
Chelsea, you've done such a nice job. I'm going to give you some credit. I think it's due to you at the beach accesses in making some consistency with them and with creative ideas too, I think, So I'm wondering how you might visualize that, and if you might just, what would you do there to make it just sort of, not spending a lot of money, but make them consistently and something to indicate?
So I have to pass on the kudos because I have some very creative staff that have done that work, but thank you, I appreciate that. Palermo's a little different because, that's in design for stormwater, and that would be where the outfall would be going. So I don't want to put anything too much in the way that when it comes time for construction that they have to pull, but sticking with what we've done on the beach accesses, and if you go to, I believe it's Miramar, on the bay side has a public access sign, but continuing with the rope and bollards, and hopefully once we get this branding decided, we can, continue that through bay and beach, so.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt. Chelsea, is the Palermo Circle, and the question of, is that where the drainage easement, did I hear you correctly? There was the neighbors saying that the town does not have a drainage easement in that location?
I believe that's what the stormwater was looking to do.
Is that the issue that gives rise to the question of we need legal to look at this, that the notation on the...
This was from years ago. And
Okay, is that
to
still...
my knowledge, that this
That
is...
issue's been resolved.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor. I've reviewed the easement document, and I've already advised staff that we have a legal easement for stormwater purposes at that location, and it is legally defensible.
Okay, there you have it.
On this same topic, just to get it all done, since we're talking about these street ends, Roger, do you remember we gave direction some previous time about the neighborhoods? It was on our strategic plan about the neighborhoods being able to get together about canals or about neighborhood parks. And we gave direction to Roger to come back with us for how that would be accomplished. And you sent out an email, I reminded you of it yesterday, Roger, and it included both this and the dredging. So if a neighborhood wants to sort of create a neighborhood park, it creates the process. So I guess my point is there's two ways of looking at this. We can do each of these just nice and simple, but the neighborhoods also have the opportunity to do that non-ad valorem, canal dredging, the concept of a neighborhood park, which we had talked about before. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, it does.
And I don't know if you wanted to hand out that document, Roger,
Yeah,
or not, and if this is a
I'll
good
put them,
time.
I don't know, it's like 5 pages. It's,
But maybe
reference, the
people just
date
wanna
was
keep it, but-
February 21st of 2018. So at that time, the council was looking at how do we handle this versus that versus that versus that. And I gave an outline of how neighbors can initiate a project in their neighborhood, and which calls for a process of showing neighborhood comprehensive neighborhood support for it, not just two people, but everybody, or vast majority of people want it, and how we would go through the process of considering that project, costing that project, and bring it forward to the council for the council to determine if the town should participate and at what level. And we're sort of using this format for Nora, and we're also using this format for the folks who had near Council Butcher's neighborhood, the lagoon, fill in a little bit. They can't get the bigger boats out because of the filling in. So we're working with both of them following this concept. I'll put a copy in each of your mailboxes for you to read at your leisure. And at some point in time in the future, if you don't like this process and want us to do something else, we'll be glad to discuss that with you.
I guess my question is, do we need to adopt that process? Does it need to go to a meeting to be formally adopted? If we review
If that
it?
would help, if that would help the revisitation of this, I think that's a great idea.
And remembering too, and this harkens back in the day, Ray, with you and Anita and Ted and John and Gar Reynolds, you passed ordinance 98-4, which is also neighborhood parks, neighborhood improvement districts. So that's on the record too, and I just think it all pertains. So thank you, that's all.
Miramar Street. Miramar Street is another Bayside access that's actually a boat ramp. And it's a public boat ramp. Or is it a neighborhood boat ramp?
Secret boat ramp.
Is there anybody want to change anything about Miramar, or do we identify it as a public boat ramp? Boy, that street would hate that.
I think it's dangerous. You don't have any parking, you don't, I mean, I see it more as a canoe ramp, but still, I'd hesitate to make that a public boat ramp.
But it's what it is.
Yeah, but I'd like the idea of just designating that it's town property in some fashion, a post with a sign or.
I agree with Bruce.
I agree that the ends of all of these, we would do the same thing.
Okay, well, then we don't need to go through all of them, correct?
Well, but we have
The
some that aren't those
Right.
circumstances.
Okay, so Miramar will be designated as town property. No one interested in changing the property's hands or anything else. Let's look at Virginia Avenue. Virginia Avenue is complicated. We've talked about it many times. We've had neighborhood work sessions with this.
Is that a buildable lot?
No.
No?
The prior council and the councilors had asked us to look into that, and it's a right-of-way, so it's not buildable for putting a structure on it per se.
Let me say that a different way. Is it big enough to be a buildable lot, which it would be with the new ordinance?
It's about 50 by 120. I just measured on LIPA to get it, their little measurement tool, so it's just a guesstimate, but it's about 50 by 120.
Well, I'll answer your question.
It's not a plotted lot, though.
It's not a
It's
platted
not a
lot.
platted lot, but we have properties of smaller dimensions than that have a house on it.
But the real question is, this is a perfect example of a parcel that we probably should make a decision about, because it serves no public purpose. We're not going to put mooring facilities here, are we? That was discussed, and the answer was no.
Correct, the
And-
discussion for upland facility for the mooring field was rejected.
But to say that it serves no public purpose, if you look, part of Virginia, the half of Virginia has canal frontage, the other half is landlocked properties.
Right,
So
that
this
could
is,
be-
this is their spot. So like Palermo, for the properties that don't have canal, this is their spot that they can come and stand and go, yep, there's the water. So I'm not sure that it doesn't have public purpose for those people. I'm just speaking on behalf of those
I would say it would
people.
make sense if you're wanting to open it up to those people on the street, that they be able to launch a kayak there. Make it a little park.
As it currently looks, if I just bought a house on Virginia, I would not think that I have any right to access the water there, because it is being used by the adjacent properties as a parking lot.
Which is why we should mark it like all the other ends of the canals with the same kind of sign and the same kind of vertical, whatever you decide to put that's
Access control.
vertical.
I agree.
But I think this is big enough that we could improve it so that there's a small opening in the mangroves or whatever to put a kayak through.
Well, I think step one would be to delineate it, then step two would be to discuss in perhaps in next year's budget, or to find money in this year's budget, if that's your direction, to try to make improvements to it. But I think the first step would be, with this and the others, is to sort of put a hard line showing that it's town property in some fashion.
Okay,
See, that's where I get into a little confusion, though, with some of the other comments, because we were talking about dredging and then we're talking about,
Nora?
Nora, thank you. The concept there was that if the neighborhoods have a majority view about doing something, who's buzzing? Is that you, Murphy? Yeah. Is that your heart? So
Haven't found one yet.
So the concept there was that if there was a majority of residents that were in favor of it, then the money would be spent, and they, if I remember correctly, the residents pay for it through their tax bills, right?
That we would bring a report to the council as to the cost, and the council can then decide, once they know the cost, and can make a determination whether or not they want to pass on 100% of the cost to the proponents or property owners, or to bear some of the cost because they think that it serves a townwide purpose. So that would be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. I don't want to say that there's a hard rule that there's never a town contribution, or
Well,
there's always a town contribution.
If I'm a homeowner and somebody's asking me to vote on this, and the bill is going to be $100,000 split among 20 people, let's just say, as an example. If I'm voting on that as a homeowner, I'd want to know, am I voting to spend $100,000 for the homeowners, or is
That's
council
a
gonna
step
do
in the
50?
process. Once we issue the report and the council makes an assessment of cost, that's when the final vote of that community
Okay.
happens.
Thank
It's
you.
probably
Okay.
Well, but maybe I'm misinterpreting what Bruce is saying. I think that if it's owned by the town, the homeowners, and they decide they want to create a little park there, they can't keep me from walking down their street and going in that park. It's not theirs just because they've decided to improve it.
Right, but, yeah, because we still own the land.
Right.
I guess I'm just saying that if we're building a park, quote-unquote, for the homeowners, should the homeowners be paying for that? They get the use of it, but the rest of the town, because it's the town's land, can go there too. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is with these things, as you look at them, is sort of redefining that it's a parcel under the town's control. That's sort of the step one. Then, the subsequent step is, does the town want to initiate improvements on any of these properties or not? And then in other cases, the adjacent residents may want to initiate improvements on that a particular piece of property. So I think it's hard when people, in some cases, don't even know that the town owns it. It looks like the adjacent property owners own it because they're using it either for parking or for some other purpose. So I think the first step is to
Delineate it.
redefine and delineate.
Right.
Yes.
And see if that spurs some neighborhood action. Hey, it would be nice to have a kayak ramp or whatever here. How do we get that done? And then we begin that process to work with them to achieve that. Or the council just says that, look, we don't have a kayak ramp for, anywhere in this vicinity, and we feel we need one there, and we're just going to put it in at 100% of town expense. But So those are the two approaches.
Actually, I have another bone to throw into the pile there. This particular lot, we were told previously, had been cleared of extraneous trailers and vehicles that were parking on it, and obviously they're parking on it again. So maybe when we delineate this area, we need to add it to the base list of places they routinely patrol. The other ends of the streets don't seem to be the problem that this one is.
Right, so delineating it, signage, and including signage that vehicles parked there will be.
Right, but add it to bases list of regular patrol spots. I know they go around certain places and check them out. It would
Yes,
seem
they
that,
do.
that Virginia Avenue needs to be added to that list.
You could also bollard and rope the front of it so that you couldn't park cars there.
Yeah, that's what I
But
was
you could still go in.
With a
So,
walkway.
yeah. Okay, so that's Virginia. Pearl Street.
There's two Pearl Streets.
There are, you know, Pearl Street has an interesting, by the way, when does BORCAB meet? Because I'm seeing some people arrive.
They're meeting.
Meeting upstairs.
upstairs.
Okay. Didn't want to shut you out, Jana. Pearl Street, so Pearl Street is actually the water access and that lot. Is that a buildable lot on Pearl Street?
I suspect the answer is no.
No.
Are we going to talk about the water's end first? Since
Well,
we're sort of
I
on the
guess I
water's
just-
end, the end of the,
I'm trying to decide how far is that lot from the water?
quite a ways.
Is it?
I
I
got
was
the
just trying to
LIPA, I got the LIPA aerial. Did
Okay.
I print it? It's way down the street.
Okay.
I
That's
didn't
kind of
print it
interesting.
out.
This one seems different than all the rest. How did we end up with this piece of property?
Couldn't figure that out either, how there was ever a
It's not
street or
close to the
anything.
water. It's,
No.
It's one we haven't looked at.
no, I don't remember that it was on the list before.
It's not a lot of record. It looks to be about 40 feet wide by 75 feet long. So it's about 3,000 square feet, and that's just using the LIPA overhead. You know how inaccurate that is. But it's not a lot, so I don't know what it is.
So I don't think that anyone knows offhand. There could be a lot of speculation in a lot of cases. In some of these subdivisions, there was a utility easement running behind the homes, and that there was a lot, or what appeared to be a small lot or something, as a way to get from back of their home to the street, should the need ever arise to do that for a utility. So it may be that, but that's purely speculation on my part.
Pearl Street's an interesting street. I was looking at the possibility of a mooring facility there, only because you've already got all these boats. But I guess that doesn't work because that lot is too far. It's too far down the street. It's at the front end of the street. Yeah. Okay, any comments on this?
Well, this one seems to me one that we need to figure out something to do with.
Well, I think the mid-block one, we should do a little bit more due diligence to be sure that we don't have a future utility need or whatever there. I'm seeing some poles in at least one of the pictures. To be sure that it's just purely dirt that we don't need for anything specific. So let us get back to you on the Pearl Street.
And how about-
Mid-block one.
Mid-block, yeah. And at the end of Pearl Street, are we going to deal with that the way we've talked about the others?
That would be my intent with not only, with both of those, if they need to be retained by the town to delineate them.
The one at the end of the street was interesting. Of course, you see the picture where it says no parking, and there's a car parking there.
Right.
But also, the marina has a big sign there that makes you think that that's
That it belongs to the marina.
belong to the marina.
Go figure.
But then but the other thing on page 57, the aerial view, they have that dock right up against the riparian line. Docks usually are over further. And so on the next page, you can see and then the aerials from LIPA, you see, they actually park boats for the marina in front of the end of the town's property, so that's the town's riparian area. So I'm not sure what the history is of that one dock that's very close there and is sort of utilizing the town's property at the end, just.
And if you look on Google Earth, which I'm looking at right now, the end here looks to be a stormwater, one of those, one of those big, an outflow, exactly. It's a stormwater outflow. But nevertheless, we should definitely designate this as the others, no?
Yes.
Okay. And you're going to get back to us on that Mid-Island piece.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Del Mar has already been decided. They have a neighborhood park here. And the same with Hercules. And the same with Coconut. And Bayview was a hotly discussed locale at one point in time.
Same.
It should be designated as town property.
Bayland, the same.
Yep.
The town council already heard this for vacation on vacation 16-0001, an attempt to vacate that, and it was turned down. So I'd say,
For a redevelopment for one of those properties, wasn't it? What was it?
yeah, it was a desire to. So I'd say that the legal work's been done on that one along the way to do that.
And Dundee is also a new one here.
Dundee
hasn't-
has an outfall in it now.
Okay, so this is,
I have a question, Madam Chair.
sure.
One that's not on this list, and I don't know whether it should be on the list, is the end of my street, Curlew. There's a ramp, a boat ramp down at the end of the street, which has been blocked up over the years. And also a shed has been built out in front of it, which tells me that someone built that because they didn't want people going down that ramp. So I'm thinking that's one that you might want to look at.
Curlew.
Yep.
So Dundee, nothing happens with, correct?
No, which is a big
And
pipe in there.
Amberjack, I,
Just the same, are we going to do with Dundee what we've done with the others then? It's,
I don't know that you need to. There is no access to this.
It's been
It
cleared
is.
out.
Different now.
it's been cleared out since those pictures, so there is access.
It's been cleared out enough to put in a 30-inch pipe going through there,
Oh,
so,
okay.
Oh, okay.
I haven't been down there. That's,
Well, there's more than a 30-inch pipe. I
yeah.
think.
So can we
It's an
just
outfall.
treat it the same as the others then?
I guess
Let them
so.
look at it?
If if you don't, you're always going to say, how come us, not them? So,
Right.
consistency
Right.
might be
Okay.
the word of the day.
Good idea. So Amberjack, again, Amberjack, when we last discussed it, Amberjack was county property. Something changed?
I will get
You
with,
I was told unequivocally that we did not own it because I was
Yeah.
really advocating to make this into a kayak launch.
Yeah.
And I was told unequivocally we did not own it. And then today, when I said to Chelsea, I'm really surprised to see this here, she says, well, I guess it's in question.
I will get
it's interesting.
with Ms. O'Reilly to clarify.
So
Yeah.
as of now, though, John, it's your belief that we do not own this?
Based upon all the information is no. But I will get with her to clarify why it's been placed back on here.
And you believe it's owned by the county?
Whoever owned the bridge before, yes,
Okay.
that right away.
Then I guess I would say that the next time Roger meets with Commissioner Sandelli, that this be brought to their attention, that we think this might be a good place for a kayak launch.
I would imagine that's going to be a big outfall.
I don't remember ever being an
Chelsea, can you
old
hear
bridge.
us? Is Chelsea still back there?
Here's a little big, if you want to just look at how it flows off of Estero. I have a question for you. Anita and Ray, because you were here at the town's inception. I've always been told that when we became a town, the county kept Estero Boulevard from the base of the bridge down around to the new bridge, and they kept their beach accesses and their county parks, and that's all. So my point is, then how would they have kept this?
I have no idea. Why-
Do you know
why
what
is
I'm
it-
saying?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's been a question of ownership on that piece of property for as long as I can remember.
Oh,
going
and
back
you're
into the
you're
70s.
intimately
Yeah, because
familiar with
your
that.
parents' place is
There
here.
there was talk about the state owning that, there was talk about the county, and of course, then when the town came into being, then there was a question of the town. It says right away, used to be landing of Old Bridge. There was not an old bridge there. There was no bridge there. There was, the only bridge there is the existing bridge. That's the bridge. There was an old restaurant there, an oyster house, if you remember that, Bruce. But
At the end of Amberjack?
yes,
Oh,
but there was no bridge landing.
but then that would have been a buildable lot, you're saying, or? Huh.
Well-
Well, at any rate, we need to
Chelsea,
determine
what's your
that, don't we?
comment on Amberjack?
I have had conflicting information. I have emailed county
Oh, for
contacts,
God's
and
sake,
so.
somebody should know that this is like, is it black or is it white? There should be that
Gray.
answer.
It's gray, but we'll get a black or white answer. We will get a black or white answer.
So, let's say it's the counties that we're done for, or in our conversation, I guess, unless you have something you want to talk to Sandelli about. How about if it's the town then?
If it's the town, I think we identify it like we did the others, but there is, as Rexanne said, I mean, this would be a perfect location for a kayak launch because you also have some opportunity for parking. It's big enough space.
We'll expedite the diving into the ownership of this.
So that, and that
Did you
fits
check this
along
on
with the
LIPA?
Calusa.
Does it
That's,
say?
that's what I just showed you.
Yeah, but does it say who owns it?
No,
No.
LIPA does, if it's not privately owned, or if they can't,
It's
they
not
just leave it
designated.
blank.
You can go
Very
to the-
frustrating.
You can go to the plat book and
We would have to go, but you can't find it on, it doesn't identify it on the LIPA website, that you would click on that area.
If there was a restaurant on that property at some point in time, it has to have been privately owned.
Or leased by the county, properly
Or
leased. by-
leased.
Yeah.
I remember some of the structure from that restaurant used to be in the water there, and you could go out and fish off of that.
It would be a nice connection to the Calusa Blue Way,
It sure would be.
whatever, because
It'd be
Mound
great.
House is one, right? And then this would be another one or whatever. And it would be somewhat passive, would be passive recreation, so.
I remember, I think, Chelsea, maybe you remember that, at one time, this was brought to the neighborhoods around there, whether they wanted something, and they said no.
Well, that was a fishing pier, I think they were talking about a big pier.
Yeah.
And they were not for that, but something passive like that. I think what they want to retain is that buffer that's there right now. I know the people at Islands End do. They want to keep that buffer. But of course, those are all exotic plants in there, and it's a jungle.
And that's where the Estero Boulevard drains today. It drains back behind that parking lot.
That's right.
And goes to the bay. So I would guess that Rob has a plan, I would think, to put an outfall there, but I don't know.
Rob may have the answer to the Amberjack question.
That drainage ditch goes right through
You'd have
that
to have
wooded
researched all
area.
that.
Goes right through there.
Okay. Chelsea, can you, at our 21st meeting, can you tell us who owns Amberjack? See if you can do that.
Yes.
Thank you, honey. Appreciate it. Okay. Anybody else have anything else to bring up in this particular zone? All right. The next item is agenda management. And so Roger and I met the other day, and I gave him my top list of things I wanted to accomplish before the end of the year, or the end of our term here. And so I'd like to just point out the number 272, outdoor display of merchandise. This has been on here since December of 2018, and it's just been pending AC or whatever. But the whole conversation about changing the outdoor display of merchandise ordinance came up when we were talking about the leasing of the space in Times Square and whatever. I don't think we should change the outdoor display of merchandise ordinance. And if you all want to review it, have at it, but I would take it off of this agenda management list. And the primary reason is you can't legislate good taste. So if you allow outdoor display of merchandise, you're going to have every imaginable thing out in the public space. And it's just, you know, the argument at the outset of this was that it would turn our public spaces into a flea market, and I think that is probably what would happen. So I would take this off of this list.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay. So if we look at the whole top area here, comp plan review, this was not discussed at today's management and planning, even though it's there, nor has code enforcement been discussed. And the comp plan review, Roger, you said that we have or haven't hired somebody for that yet?
We have a request for proposal or letter of interest that we're soliciting a firm to actually do that. As I explained to you, Madam Mayor, when we met, that it would be our objective to bring that to you before this council flips over.
Approve the contract, but
To
not to
approve the
discuss the
contract,
review.
then once that firm is engaged, it will take them a better part of a year to actually come forward with any recommendations and changes to the comp plan, because that is a complicated process by virtue of the fact that there's usually, once the recommendations are formed, there's some charrettes, there's meeting with the LPA, you know, well in advance of even bringing any changes to council for consideration.
Okay.
So our objective there would be to bring that forward to you with respect to the firm before this council completes its work.
So I guess what I'm pointing out is that the comp plan review itself is not up for discussion. It's only the letting of the contract.
Correct.
So, so code enforcement, does anybody else have that as a priority that we'd like to discuss, the code enforcement policy before this council
Yes.
changes? I agree. I would like to discuss it. Anybody else? Okay, I know, I talked about
glad
this
to
with
do it.
Roger. He said Daphne was working on.
Yeah,
on-
yes.
yeah, unfortunately, Daphne caught what the vice mayor had.
See?
Not necessarily from
See how
him,
infectious you are?
but in any event, the reason we didn't put it on the agenda was because we knew she wasn't going to be here today, but
Okay, well, maybe it could go on our next work session.
yes.
Okay. The.
Just to clarify the record.
Remains to be seen. So discussion on the lizards, you know, there was some discussion as to whether or not the town was going to, I want to dispense of this. There was some discussion about whether or not the town was going to engage in lizard catching, lizard trapping. Does anybody have any direction that that's the business that we want to get into? Or I don't want to get into it either. Do we want to simply have the town have resources at our fingertips so when somebody calls, Donna can say, call joelizardtrapper.com?
They call us same guy that does rats.
My experience with this, with talking to other folks, is twofold. Number one, the iguana problem is getting worse. People are not addressing it because the iguana doesn't come in your house like a rat does. So until it tears out behind their seawall, they're not calling anybody and spending any money. So I think we do need to be a little more aggressive about it, and just giving people a phone number to call isn't very helpful because A, they have to pay for it. B, the experience of the MRF committee was when they called these people to try to get educated and get more information, some of these people never called them back. They called them 6 or 8 times. I guess lizard trappers are not really good business people. They kind of work when they feel like it.
Oh, Lord.
So I would like to explore something a little more aggressive, whether it is that we have some traps available that we could loan to people with instruction. This is how you use the trap, and maybe have the option available that we would dispose of lizard bodies for them. People don't want to kill the lizard themselves. They're kind of large, and it's more unpleasant than killing a mouse in many people's view. But my concern is the iguanas are getting worse. People are not taking care of the issue, and it is going, if we wait, it's hard, it's like the boa constrictors in the Everglades. They're now out of control. So I would like to be a little more aggressive about it in some fashion.
Joanne, how do you feel?
I don't want to utilize staff, but I'm amenable to other options. You know, her mentioning traps, I'm not sure if Mr. Herron would say that that's an appropriate thing for us to do or not. As far as getting rid of the bodies, I don't know. I know somebody who is very environmentally oriented, but has a problem on their property, and once they trap them, they go in the freezer. That's the humane way.
I know
And
that
once
same person, and I found that hysterical.
Yeah.
My
and-
freezer isn't big enough to
Well,
put
yeah,
them on it.
but at any rate, just as another layer of information. So I don't think the town should be in the business. The town can manage their own properties, provide information, but if there is some other way that legally doesn't get us in trouble, like if somebody gets hurt with the trap we provided, I don't know. But I agree, I wouldn't mind doing a little bit more to make it slightly more possible.
Ray, you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I think we have to be a little more involved, to tell you the truth, because, you know, if we just let it go and leave it to people's decisions to make whether they want to go after them or not, that doesn't solve the overall problem of these things mass producing now, you know, and before long we'll be overrun, and we'll be back to this same problem, addressing it again on how we're going to get rid of all these things now that they've taken over the island, which they can very well do.
So Roger, it looks like you've got two that want to be more aggressive, two that don't want the town in it, and one that wants some mid-ground idea of what could be done. So you can deal with Rexanne and Ray and your next three people later on this, because I don't think we need to discuss it any further. Does anybody else? I mean, you're going to have to come up with a plan, because Ray and Rexanne are going to be here and they want a plan. Okay, Randy Alexander. Roger, you want to just say quickly what we had discussed at the
Yes,
our
Madam
meeting?
Mayor.
And that way we can,
And
by the way, thank you for doing that too. I thought that was very, well, when you tell them, I'll thank you afterwards. It's very nice what you've done.
So, unbeknownst to me, that there was, in the fine print of our town insurance policy, there's diminishing life insurance benefit for employees over 65. And we looked at that, and basically the effect is his payout to his family would be reduced by just under $20,000 because of that. And And my feeling, but it's not my money, it's the five of your money, is that we should step forward and make up that difference. Moreover, I would like to instruct staff to work with our insurance company for our next fiscal year to eliminate that clause, or at least bring back to the council the cost of eliminating that clause, because I do feel that it's hard for the employees to as they deal with their family affairs, as they, they're loyal and work hard for us, to deal with, well, I have to figure out how I'm going to adjust things now that it went down by X number of dollars a year every year. It's just good for them to know that should something unfortunate happen to them, be it death or injury, that they know what they can expect from the town, and it's not something that varies or is a formula or something that they would have to try to calculate from year to year. So my hope is you'll support the opportunity for us to step in and help Mr. Alexander's family through this difficult time, and hopefully the delta for our subsequent premiums will be minor enough that we can absorb it. But that's not a question for today. It's
I
just the
would
first
agree
question.
with both things that Roger has requested, that we do make up the difference, A, and B, I would like to look at leaving that clause out if it's financially feasible. 65 isn't as old as it used to be.
No, it's not. I agree completely. Joanne, you have any objection to it?
No, no objection.
Any objection from either one of you? Okay. All right, so we discussed the Palm Avenue, the Estero landscape and maintenance update. Roger, is that something that you want to comment on, or that we just need to, we're waiting to get something from the county on?
Well, I'll just comment to this extent. We brought to the county manager's attention and the Lee County District Commissioner's attention a point that I believe Councilor Shamp made, that at one point, one representative of the county was saying that the landscaping budget for a Estero project was $1 million, and now they're saying 800,000, so we brought that to their attention. We brought to their attention that because of the physical layout of Estero Boulevard, that the town might be more flexible on what types of plantings that would go in there versus what the county might be willing to allow. So if they're going to give us the money, we're going to ask them that they give us the flexibility to make those determinations. We reminded the county that the cost of the landscape is not just the initial installation. So even if they only had sod there or minimal landscaping there, they would still have a recurring expense to take care of that. So we would like to get a credit for that as part of the package of the count considering taking it over. And then the last item was because, as you all know, that those areas don't have irrigation, that they're currently servicing watering the sod that they currently have there, with the so-called temporary sod, with a water truck. So we asked them to, to be aware that a water truck at a minimum would be needed for all of that. So all that being said, they're looking at those issues. They're trying to put together a draft agreement for us to take over the landscaping program, but they haven't generated that document yet.
May I make a comment? I mentioned many times in the past that we ought to consider putting irrigation into those county areas, and nobody said anything. So, tough luck, I guess.
There's a plant you can put in. It's used in downtown Fort Myers instead of grass. It's a variant of the pea plant. It has a small yellow flower on it. It grows profusely. You don't have to irrigate it. You don't have to mow it. So we don't have the ongoing cost. If it does get out onto the sidewalk or whatever, you can mow it if you need to, but it doesn't need regular maintenance. I've driven by it and noticed it many times in downtown Fort Myers. It seems to be doing very well there in the median area.
Yeah, there are several species of perennial peanut and other types of plants that are good ground cover that require minimum maintenance. However, at one point, I know the council talked about putting some trees and other things that may require irrigation, or at least irrigation during the establishment period.
The other part that I was going to get to that I didn't get to was that when you get to this very south end, the last mile, I'm going to call it, my recollection is it's going to look a lot different because they have such a broader right-of-way, and there may be an opportunity for more significant landscaping than the 2-foot, 18-inch area that we have today. What Rexanne's talking about in that narrow area sounds like a good approach.
Well, our objective is to see under what financial and other restrictions we can gain control of the landscaping decisions, and then have the council make determinations about plantings. And what we would do is probably create 2 or 3 sample schemes based on the amount of area we have to work with. We'd actually bring the plants in here in pots and set it up so you could say this is what a typical scheme A would be for sort of the smallest, most narrow area, so on going up to the biggest areas. Then we would actually put them out on the side of the road for people to see, not in the ground, but above ground for people to see in a couple of sample areas, get some feedback, and then once everyone decides that that's green lighted, then go forward and actually install the plant. So
Let me go back to my other point. My point is, if we want irrigation in these wider landscaping areas in the south mile, we need to do something now because they're finishing their plans. They're going to be going down there. We're putting in the water lines already. And we need to get an understanding of that. So we need to probably ask Rob to show us what the engineering look is now for that last mile and make some preemptive decisions. Because if you go down to Bonita Beach Road now, I'm pretty sure they're putting irrigation in their median strips down there now that they didn't have them. And also on 41, the county looks like they're putting in irrigations where they didn't have it before because they didn't have success with their plantings without irrigation in a wider area.
Okay. Any other comments on this?
My only comment would be a little concerned about the cost of that. I'm a little bit with Rexanne that we need to lean toward native plantings as much as possible and be aware of the impacts of cost. And honestly, you know, the use of water, just the plain water bill of watering massive areas like that, and the use of, we don't have, unless we have reclaimed water, is that a way that we want to go? I think it needs to be talked about in a day and age where people talk about lack of water.
I'll just point out again at Bonita Springs, when they redid their downtown section that we looked at and some people admired, it's all irrigated.
I was through there the other day. It was, because that
Lovely in the
Bonita Springs Art Show was incredible. What a crowd. My Lord, it was amazing.
My only
It
other
was nice to
comment
see that.
on this would be, I'm wondering at some point if we might politely invite Garden Club, you know, and if we're having a meeting where we're talking about the plantings, it might be nice to invite them. I haven't worked with them and I don't know what their expertise is, but it seems like there's a lot of people with good knowledge there.
Okay, so the other thing that needs to come off of this is the top CPD. Obviously, we're not going to be hearing any of that. And
Number was that again? Sorry.
that's number 353.
Thank you.
So, no, at least not in the near future.
In this version.
Yeah. And my other question here was, we never rescheduled the work session with the Board of Realtors. Joanne, Bruce, any interest in making this a ultimate meeting priority, or do we leave this to the next group?
I thought, you know, the conversation was because of the issue that they wanted clarification on the 3-day. I think you proposed meeting with them. I'm not a big fan of meeting because I think it was the interpretation of that 3 days
right.
in a week, and that's a problem, you know.
Well, I wanted to meet with the realtors because of the confusion that we have. I've got a list of a half a dozen items that I'd like to talk to them about. But,
Let's do it.
and one of them is the short-term rental for less than a week. Now, we talked about the 3-day for condos, but not the 3-day for
Right,
houses.
for less than a week. Okay, well, Michelle, is it possible to see if we could if we could get the realtors scheduled sometime? I mean, it'd be great to throw them on maybe the February 6th meeting. Thank you.
And do we have a list of issues? You said you had like 6 issues.
Yeah,
How will we come up
Chelsea's
with
got 'em.
that? How would we come up with that?
I think Chelsea's got the list.
Okay, maybe
does
maybe
anybody
you
else-
could work with Chelsea if anybody has a topic they'd like to discuss.
Yeah, I
with
would-
them.
I was just going to suggest, if you have a topic, to get it to Michelle, because I think it might spur them into freeing up their calendar for a meeting sooner if they see what the topics are versus a meeting of undefined topics.
Okay, So is there anything else from anyone that you want to prioritize or move up for these next meeting dates? Anybody have anything? Bruce?
Well, mine was the
The re-
short-term rental less than
The
7
realtors,
days.
okay.
And then the other was, we talked several times about the process for the town manager's review and pay adjustment, and never has happened.
Can we do that at February 6th?
Sounds good.
Okay, town manager review. And so we're not going to, just that's all we're going to discuss is the
Yes.
process. Okay?
Now, what is the WINS parking agreement?
That has to do with the Center Street and Fifth Street parking. And I think that's going to be really driven by what happens, because Roger addressed this when we were talking to the commissioner. I think that's going to be driven by the realignment of the
Well,
street.
that's why I'm wondering if that shouldn't be part of the conversation, just when we're showing that, you're going to be showing that overall presentation.
Yeah,
I wonder
that
if
was-
that isn't part of it.
Excuse me, that was initiated by the attorney for WINS. They're the ones who came in, they're the ones who put it on hold. I did share the concept that was mentioned by council about the creating a dedicated right turn lane that would run in front of WINS and then be the right on to Old St. Carlos with both FDOT and with Lee County. Is something that hopefully they would take a look at and see if it made sense to do. So it was raised to them in the last 2 weeks to both parties.
And Roxanne, you're bringing forward that Houses of Worship on February 6th, is that?
I'm not bringing it forward.
Or it'll
The
be-
LPA, I believe, agreed that it was an issue that needed to be looked at and sent it back to staff for further research.
Right, that's the instruction that I gave the staff based on all the comments I've heard is create a chart with the existing House of Worships, what their current uses are relative to other uses that might be desirable for them to have, and they're going to prepare that matrix and bring it forward, and so that the issue can be studied, and you can look at all those places of houses of worship at the same time on the same page. So they're working on that.
And the only other one would be the request for rehearing of Texas Hold'em. It seems to me that we should probably,
That's on the agenda for the Tuesday.
okay, good, very good, since we were the ones that had the original decision.
So Bruce, anything else? Let me just go back to you. Did you have anything else that you want to prioritize?
With somebody else, I
Okay.
had another thought and I lost it.
Ray, anything for
Nope.
you? Roxanne?
Yes, my understanding is that Beach Baptist filed for a lien mitigation very close to Christmas, and I wondered what date it's going to be on our agenda.
I'll have to check it. It's, with lien mitigations, you have to be in compliance. So, well, I'll check, but I'll send you all an email with respect to
They're
that.
very interested in having this heard before the council changes up again.
You know,
And they filed it, like I said, around Christmas, so it seems fair to me that it would get in here within 3 months.
Yeah, again, our current rules say that you have to be, the property owner has to be in compliance, but if you want to waive that, we can
If-
bring it forward.
Are you aware that they are not in compliance? Because that may need to be communicated to them.
I'm just speculating as to why it hasn't come forward, but I'll
Okay.
clarify that.
Yeah, please do, because they may be believing that they are in compliance, and you may not be moving because you think they aren't, so. The other thing that I would ask about is the turtle lighting ordinance. We keep saying we're waiting on FWC, And what I've been told is that FWC's been sitting on this for maybe 2 years. So I'm not optimistic that they're moving. Maybe we should just go ahead.
It sure would be nice to discuss turtle lighting with street lighting, since the turtle lighting seems to be cumbersome with the street lighting discussion. So who do we contact with FWC to get some answers on this? Is it possible to have someone from that organization? I just think we need to talk to it in concert.
The answer is we will reach out to them and ask them to come give us an update as to where they are, and we could discuss interim actions that the council may want to take until they complete their process if you feel that it's too far out.
Well, what I've been told we're waiting on is a model ordinance. They're under no legal obligation to issue a model ordinance. They say they're going to, but they haven't. That doesn't mean we can't fix ours, because they may never issue a model ordinance.
That is correct. It's correct.
When do these microphones get fixed?
The new ones are on order. We're waiting for them to be.
I'm just leaving my finger here on the button. The LPA yesterday asked about this, and staff's response, including mine, was the process flows from actually the federal agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service,
Oh, that's even worse.
since they're the since they're the entity that is responsible for setting the rules and regulations for enforcement of the Endangered Species Act, which is where the turtles fall under. And so FWC relies upon the most recent data provided to it by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to then update the model ordinance, which they do update on a regular basis, and that's a matter of interpretation, and that's what we're waiting for, as I understand it. But as the manager indicated, we'll reach out to FWC staff for clarification, and if they're willing to appear before you and explain what's going on, then we'll make those arrangements.
Well, again, what I'm advocating is I don't particularly care what their answer is unless they say it's coming out this month, because my understanding, staff's already done the work about some stuff we need to fix, and it's been sitting here for a very long time. I don't like it when we start a process, put a bunch of work into it, and then it never gets finished. So, again, I don't particularly care what FWC says unless they're telling me it's coming out tomorrow. Let's just move ahead and fix our ordinance. Our staff already worked on it.
So if staff has worked on it, then the whole turtle lighting issue should be discussed with the street lighting options at that sixth work session.
I'm not sure I want to mix the two. It's so complicated.
But Roxanne, so for example, if it seems to me, and I rewatched the meeting where this was discussed because I wasn't here, if you're talking about street lighting and objections to the street lighting have to do with turtles.
It doesn't just have to do with turtles, though. That's why it's too complicated. There's all these people bringing in stuff from the AMA about the quality of the lights that has nothing to do with the turtles. So then you've made all the turtle people sit through a discussion about other stuff that really isn't relevant to the turtle issue. I think, and I would like for everybody to see, the staff may have just fixed some stuff that really has nothing to do with our street light problem.
So let's put it on for the same agenda then. Not necessarily in the intermixed discussion, but maybe we could have the staff report on that on the 6th agenda. Possible? Possible?
Definitely possible.
Okay.
Okay, I remembered my thing.
But,
But go ahead.
Madam Mayor, just so
Yes, sir.
you're aware, we're trying to get the FPNL folks here for the 21st, so in case you want to talk about street lighting then.
21st?
Yes,
You're trying to get him here for the 21st. Oh, okay. So because our street lighting, the street lighting options is scheduled for the 6th MMP.
we're just working with their schedule, so
Okay.
we'll see if we can get them there. We'll get them here whenever we can get them here while this council is still in session.
Okay.
Roger, if I could add something to that. I met with FPNL yesterday, and I was going through the process and asking them questions and information. And they were very helpful. And then they were going to send me a presentation, and I got that late yesterday afternoon. And it's a interesting presentation, but it doesn't completely answer what the concerns are on the beach. It was more of a presentation of high-pressure sodium versus LED lights, which is,
Can they answer those questions, Bruce?
yes,
They
I
can.
think so.
Okay.
So high-pressure sodium to LED to me is a no-brainer, but that's my opinion from a carbon footprint standpoint. And dark sky, it's a no-brainer that you got to change out of high-pressure sodium. So, Roger, I would prefer, based on the presentation I got from them yesterday, to wait till February 6th. Is that an M&P, right?
February 6th is M&P,
And
yes.
We'll see if we can get them here for February 6th.
Yeah.
Because you're going to try and work with them to be able to answer the AMA questions and all of that.
Yep.
Wonderful. Great. That's great news. Great news. Okay. Anything else, Joanne? Anything you want to prioritize here?
No, it's just, I'm going to mention something we talked about before, and I had, over the holiday period, had turned in my thoughts, and if council still want to do it, it was regarding the concept of a town council orientation that would be
Right.
used every time there's an election or something,
Oh,
what we did.
Did you give that to us?
I sent mine to Roger, I don't know about him.
I don't,
We were all supposed to send in what we thought, I sent mine to Roger, that's all I know.
okay.
That's where it stopped, and I don't know if the interest is still there or not, but that's my only topic.
I think it should be part of our policies and procedures manual. We should have a new town council orientation. I agree, especially, even if it came down to having a week or two following the election where that's their orientation period. So what do we need to do to follow up with that? Does anybody else agree with that?
I agree with that, but also I just wanted to mention that it seemed like when I ran one time, the candidates would come in and speak with the staff of the town, right? Is that on the process? You don't remember doing that? Oh, I do. I remember sitting up there and we quizzed whatever her name was, the finance person, and Maureen, and asked her about reserves and stuff, and then that's when we understood.
Were you by yourself or with a group of people?
No, there was 6 of us or so.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was an opportunity for the candidates to get informed about what, ask questions, but.
Okay. I think that's, so what do we need to do to move this forward? Do we need to give you ideas? Could we see Joanne's ideas to see whether or not there's something we want to add on to it? Is that possible for you to send that to us?
Yeah, I could share it with you. I don't see any reason for that. And then, I could give you a couple of days to give you a chance to augment it if you feel
Okay.
that there's something missing.
Great.
That you'd
I
like
can
to
just
see
read it to
included.
you right now, and everybody can pipe in.
Because of course you've got it with you. All right.
Yeah, hang it. We can
I-
get back to it in just a moment.
Let's have Roger send it to us, and
Very
that way
good.
we can have a day or two to think about what we want to add to it. I think
Very
that's a
good.
great addition. Okay. Roxanne, anything else?
And I just had one other
Sorry.
thing. There's a possibility I'm going to not be here on Tuesday. So I'd like an excused absence, but
Oh.
I may not need it.
Okay, well, just in case you're
And
not here.
the issue I've gone over, one of the issues that I probably would have piped in a lot on already with staffs, and so I'm happy with how it is.
Okay. You piped in with staff.
On
Okay,
the
so-
EC zone one already.
Oh, got it.
I've already sort of seen what they're going to be working on. since
Okay.
that was-
Okay. All right,
For
anything
that,
else?
excuse
Go
me,
ahead.
that excused absence, is that so you can have a perfect record over your, the term? Because, you're almost done now. I mean, it's nice to have the excused
Have
absence.
you missed any meetings? I don't think you have.
My son's wedding.
Oh, yeah.
I think just one, my
Oh,
son's wedding.
all right.
Was excused.
Well, try
And
to
that
be
was-
there.
Yeah, that was excused.
Try to get here Tuesday.
Well, I plan to, but there's a possibility I won't be.
Well, if you can't, you can't, that's all. All right, so anything from anybody else? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn. And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Hearing no objection, it's 12:33, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.